right. So, welcome, Something Wicked DocuFest. Please tell us your name, what you did on your film, and what your film is.
Okay, so my name is Paul Zagaris. I am a film producer, completely independent, not really tied to any studios or any connections in the industry. But I am born and raised in Northern California. I'm self-producing most of the films that I'm making at this point right now, and working to try to get my films distributed. That's one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle that I've yet to figure out. But working on that. Meanwhile, running my films through the film festival circuit. So this is my first year, my first foray into film festival world, and it's been interesting because I didn't expect to be winning awards, and now that we are, it's built. A byproduct of winning awards is it's really motivated everybody around me that's involved in the projects and stuff. It's motivated them more. I mean, to me, it was always like I loved them, like my children, right? But now I have other people who are also kind of coming along for the ride, and it's a really cool experience. I'll be honest. So no, I grew up in Northern California. I studied cinema. I studied film theory at UCSB. I ended up studying film history at UCLA, and then I went to law school and never did anything with it until later. I went to law school and got out and stayed in banking for a long time, and then ended up just by the time I got by about probably 8 years ago, reunited with some friends of mine that had always stayed in film, and we kind of just started working on projects together, and I started building things up and basically fully entrenched myself in cinema and got back into it, and now we're working on documentaries and narratives, trying to get into narratives fully, starting with documentaries because their barrier for entry is a little bit lower. The threshold for barrier for entry for the cost and stuff is a little bit less. But no, I mean, yeah, we kind of incredible what you can do right now with cameras and the technology. I mean, the stories, if you have a story, it's amazing. Things are so much more affordable than they used to be. It still seems so far out of reach from when I started. Because I mean, I started on 8mm. I started on 8mm. I actually messed up my first film when I was a kid. I started with camcorders, like filming G.I. Joe movies, like blowing them up, and I went back. Yeah, it's funny. So I went back to look at my old toys because my parents kept them all in boxes and stuff. So I went back and like all my G.I. Joes had like scars from like being blown up with firecrackers and stuff. So anyway.
Oh, crazy.
I don't know what happened to those films either. They have to be on little VHS little cassette tapes somewhere. I have those movies. They were hilarious. And the funny thing is, the older I got, the more degenerate the movies got, the more like we would make fun of All Quiet on the Western Front, and we'd squirt ketchup on the guys and be like, blood, symbolism, blood, and just to get extra credit.
Okay. All right. So tell us a little bit about your film, and especially what made you do this as the subject matter for your film, because it's very interesting.
So for Wedding 93 or Nation's Promise?
Nation's Promise.
So Nation's Promise. Okay. So Nation's Promise is a Vietnam War documentary that my second cousin, he's a Vietnam War vet. He had told me about this group of special forces men that were responsible for the covert missions that were happening in Laos and Cambodia. During the Vietnam War, we were running missions outside the area which we said we were running. And the idea was that these guys had these incredible stories. So by the time I actually got introduced to this network of veterans. Many of them hadn't told their story because they were top secrets. They were sworn to silence until that lapsed in like the 2000s, and by that time they finally were able to open up. They started writing books, and they hadn't really done too much on film. So we got a hold of some of their stories, started talking to them, and it's one thing about veterans is they never talk about themselves in the first person as being a hero. They always sort of reference their friends and their colleagues who are the heroes. And so it was only natural that the stories that because some of these stories they would tell are insane. Like they have like more, like if you could encapsulate some of these stories, they would make an extreme version of an action movie that you can only imagine. I mean, they have some, group of 8 of them or 12 of them are behind enemy lines against 2,000 troops, and they get pinned down, and then the enemies baiting helicopters in and shooting the helicopters down in order to then recapture the troops that were in the helicopters. And I mean, the stories you hear are crazy. So I met this group, and out of the stories they wanted me to tell were the stories that were important to them, one of which is about finding those missing in action. And the story, one of the stories was about these 2 friends who were friends in high school, and one went missing, and his friend heard about it, and he ended up joining the special forces to then go look for his friend. And that's where Nation's Promise picks up.
Now, that's a very interesting story for this film, because one of the things I liked about it is that it was telling a story, not one that I was very familiar with, for one, because it was about the bond these 2 soldiers had. And it's not like, I'm trying to figure out the perfect word there. The story took me by surprise. So I was like, okay, another Vietnam story. Okay. I've seen a lot of those, but to be honest with you, it's really about these 2 best friends. And the footage that you have in here is simply amazing. I was like, where did he get that footage? That must have cost him an arm and a leg to get some of this footage.
You want to hear? Yeah, you want to hear about that?
Yes, I definitely want to hear about that.
So we started out. We didn't really have. We knew what the storyline was because we were talking about these friends. And come to find out, one of the special forces guys shot a bunch of film on 8mm, and he had never given it to anybody. So we have original, never before seen 8mm footage, and then. Not all of it, but I'd probably say a good like 40-50% of the footage in there is never before seen.
Oh, wow.
Millimeter footage. So we got a lot of public domain footage and archive, like Library of Congress type footage. But with regards to some of the 8mm footage, we had all this footage from one of the guys that were running these missions, these secret missions. So he had a treasure trove, and then I digitized all that. And I was at a cafe in Sacramento talking about my documentary, and I was like telling somebody that I was sitting with, I was like, yeah, we digitized this footage. And this lady next to me chimes in, is like, my dad was a Vietnam War vet, and he was in the Air Force, and he was like the guy that looks through the whole, the bombers. And I have all this 16mm footage that's never been digitized. So that shot where like the missile is coming down has never been seen before because.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I ended up just talking about this story in public that night, driving to their house, picking up these undigitized 16mm. I had to buy like a 16mm reel just to see if I had something, right? I was like, or a projector. So that's the story on the film.
Wow. So as a documentary filmmaker, how much of this footage was left on the cutting room floor? Was there a whole bunch or just a little bit?
There's a little bit, yeah. There's, some dead bodies that we didn't put in there. There's a stripper or 2 that we left out. Some entertainment with the troops and some God. Things that we. Yeah.
So, what was the hardest part of putting this movie together? I mean, because it's not like like your personal story, but you're finding all this archival footage and the interviews, and what was the hardest part of putting all this together?
I think the footage to complement. The story ended up unfolding and kind of telling itself. So we interviewed the subjects, right? We interviewed the people that, the sister, and we interviewed the family members and like the colleagues. There are some other interviews that would have been good to have in there. The King B helicopters that come in were manned by Vietnamese that were on our side. So essentially these special forces groups were made up of 2 or 3 American men, and then about 8 or 9 indigenous. And the indig that would go in there. So we didn't get too many interviews with the indig. We didn't get too many interviews with the King B helicopters or the Queen B helicopters. But as far as the hardest part of this was probably finding footage that kept the momentum of the storyline, because the footage that we had, so finding the public domain footage that matched, because the problem is not many people filmed this troop. So if you'll notice, we can't just use regular footage that you would see in a Ken Burns documentary or on History Channel, because the footage on the History Channel and Ken Burns shows mostly infantrymen who have helmets and their all the normal gear. These guys were in flop hats, no dog tags, got dropped off hundreds of miles inland with no identification in a group of 3 American and 8 or 9 Indians, and that was like a very unique group. So finding footage that didn't tell our story but take away from the fact that we're actually telling a story about a group. So there's very little footage of these men. That was probably the hardest part.
That must have been tough searching for all that stuff. But since you've been saying that, how many features have you done? Documentary features have you done?
So I have 2 now out right now. We have Wedding 93 and Nation's Promise, and I'm working on a 3rd one in the meantime. So yeah, so it's 3.
All right. So I want to ask you, because we talked a little bit about this, is you've been getting some awards, you've been getting some notification for the film. How was like the initial reactions to this film when did you hear about those? What were those reactions?
So far, so good. I mean, the main people that we were interested in getting reactions from were going to be the family members. We wanted to make sure that we did them justice, right? And we didn't know. I guess going back to the other question too, was some of the more difficult things. I think one of the difficult things was to make sure that we didn't tell a story from a point of view that tried to push the audience one way or the other. Because Vietnam is a distant memory for many people, but it's also politically polarizing. And this movie wasn't really about that. This movie was more about patriotism, about their brotherly love for each other, and about the country. And in a time where that's there's a lot of division and stuff, it's you don't want to run the risk of communism bad, U.S. good. You don't want to go too far down that road. I mean, you do in some sense, but you also don't want to make the movie about that, because the movie really is about the secret war and these 2 men who was going to find the other.
Yeah, you do a good job balancing that. Now that you mention it, yeah, I was like, not once did I ever think of the fact that your film may have gone a little bit overboard in regards to being polarizing with the politics in it. You kept it about the 2 characters for the most part, and I think it was a well balanced film. So
yeah, we put that at the beginning. We put a history of Vietnam a little bit, right? We had to quickly get to the point where we talked about them, because we didn't want to just assume audiences knew much about Vietnam at all. And we didn't want to bore the people that have watched every single thing on History Channel and know all the footage, right? We don't want to bore them with the content as well. So we were able to cover the history and the politics, get to the point where the story is really being told about the 2. And really there's a section of the Defense Department that we worked with. The Defense Department is tasked with essentially locating missing. Well, there aren't very many missing people anymore. Like Iraq War, I don't even know if there's a single missing person. But the people from Korea, Vietnam, World War II, Civil War, all those wars are going to have a lot of missing. Vietnam has a quantifiable amount of men that are missing. So, yeah, I don't know. It's been interesting. It's not. They have so many other stories I want to tell. So as soon as I can find distribution for this film, there are other stories I want to tell. There's another one where this fighter plane went down, and they know that location, so they'll raise money and they'll get support from the Defense Department, and they'll do excavations, and they'll try to find. So the last known sighting of where they're at, then they'll go do the excavations, and they'll try to see if they can find remains, and they'll DNA test the remains, and then that way they can kind of pair up the missing, and they can bring them home to rest. So it's been interesting, but it's fascinating to me because it's technically it's technically for a good thing. It's a good thing. It's technically a dying theme that we have, that we just assume that there are missing in action. Most of the time, there are no more missing in action. So this whole theme of there being missing in action and humanity's effort to try to our country's effort to try to locate them and then to properly bury them, that's gone. I think it'll be gone in the next 50, 60 years. There won't really be a need for that because we won't have any more missing, really.
That's an interesting point to make. You are absolutely right. I never thought about it till now. Because you are right. I think Vietnam and Korea, they always talk about the people who are still missing. But the wars nowadays, or the conflicts nowadays, that's not something that anyone talks about because of the way our technology is and the way that we conduct ourselves in terms of those conflicts now.
Yeah.
There is no missing anymore. So it is something that gets lost and people take for granted now.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, so it'll be kind of interesting to see what happens with it. I mean, there'll probably always be the one random person that they don't know where they went, but for the most part, there's so much surveillance and accountability and keeping track of where everything. So I don't know what's going to happen with this, but these stories are going to probably fade over time. You know, locating all of the Civil War veterans and stuff is going to always be that'll be a forever history thing because they're probably buried under mounds of soil. But yeah, no, this is down to I think it's down to under 2,000 troops from Vietnam, 1,200 troops, or I can't remember the exact number. But it's some of these stories. So anyway, long story short, there's some other stories that we want to be able to tell that are involved with these groups.
So, did you have a background or an interest in these type of war films before you took on the subject, or is the subject just so captivating that you're now engrossed in these stories?
That was it. It was I mean, I love history. I mean, I watch all the movies, Platoon and, Predator. I watch all the Vietnam War movies. So, and it was an interesting era, and I love it. What was that Mel Gibson movie? I just watched it the other day. Last Man? No. The one where he's the first man on the battlefield and the last one out. I can't remember the name. Anyway, there's a lot of Vietnam War movies that I grew up on, and it's definitely been an interest. But no, it was never really a subject matter I wanted to tackle. But I knew as soon as I heard the story, I knew what we had. And then as we started to film this, my goal was to get as much original content as I could so that we could insert it. For example, there's a portion in there where there's audio from the helicopter chatter. And we didn't have that at the beginning when we started this. And so by the time I heard that, I realized this is a big deal. Like, we have the actual audio chatter of one of them dying.
Oh, wow.
So if you listen to, I don't know if you've ever listened to there's the point in the movie where there's an audio chatter between the helicopter pilots. They're saying we have the 1-1 aboard, or the 1-0. They're number 1-0 and then 1-1, or I can't remember the exact designations. But long story short, when they're on the audio chatter, you can hear the 1-0's aboard dead. That was Doug, who died.
Nice. Well,
we have the actual audio of one of the guys that was one of the best friends.
Man.
Yeah.
So
I hope I'm not mixing the names up right now. This has been about a year.
It'll be okay. You're getting the point across about what your film is about, and you're more concerned with representing this amazing friendship between these two characters and actually giving their legacy something that their surviving family members can appreciate and general audiences can understand. Because I think you're right in that a lot of people nowadays, we've kind of forgotten certain aspects of wars because of the types of wars that we have now are completely different than the types of wars that used to be there. So
Alan Boyer's sister was a really big component of this. Judy, it was such a big deal for us because to have the family involved and then to be able to, we weren't making the movie to satisfy them as an audience. You know, we weren't trying to make this and then make sure that we placate. We wanted the movie to go its own direction without any influence. So we sort of we were able to be very voyeuristic as far as seeing where the story would take us, seeing what people would tell us, and then bring the pieces together. And at no point did we let any other parties influence us. But then at the end of that process, to be able to show it to everybody and for them all to be extremely proud of the memories and accurate that were in our portrayal was something that I felt really good about.
Yeah. Well,
we didn't set out to do that though.
Well, it brings me to my next question, which is, what is it that you're working on now? I know you're working on another documentary. You have one out there in the film festivals, another one, but and then you mentioned that you want to do something that's more narrative. You okay? So
I don't know if I
give it to me.
I don't know if I submitted Wedding 93, but that's one that we're doing right now. That's a Cambodian horror one.
You didn't submit that one.
Okay.
I watch every movie that's submitted to me.
All right.
That's my job.
I can send you a private link on that one. That one is the one that we're trying to get distribution on right now, and same with Nation's Promise, but completely different audiences, completely different feel, two different separate documentaries. My third documentary we're in process right now. It's called Subversion, and it's going to be.
Sit down, buddy.
It's not. It's a political piece.
Oh, okay.
About the times. It's going to be more of a red pill to society. So I don't know if you know, but essentially it's going to be much more controversial. That one's going to be very polarizing.
Oh.
So anyway, so I'm doing that. And then I have, we have a TV series that we're developing out, 2 TV series. These are way at the beginning, so this isn't anywhere close to being made.
Okay.
One of them's like a Double Dragon video game adaptation, right? It's basically Warriors meets Mad Max. Okay. So, and it's set in side-scrolling beat 'em up universe called Next Level.
Okay.
So we have 8 episodes scripted, and and I filmed some teaser stuff for it, and the goal would be either to Kickstarter that or to try to get a studio to buy it. So that's another project that we're working on.
So what I want to get at, and what you've been telling me right now, is that you have this huge indie spirit in terms of getting your films and your projects done. Because I'm assuming that all of them have been non-studio films that you've been hustling to get financing and or people to help you work on these, which is something that a lot of us documentary filmmakers have to do. So I commend you on that, but tell us a little bit about why you're going that route as opposed to trying to go the route of getting a distributor, a producer to distribute it and all that kind of stuff first before you make your film.
So it's a very interesting. I don't know that side of the business very well. So even though I went to film school and stuff, it's just I just don't have those contacts. And now at this point right now, as far as why I'm not going directly with the distributors, they all want me to go with sales agents. They keep pushing me to aggregators, and I'm just thinking, like, why don't I just sell to you directly? Why do I want to go through that? I don't want to give this person part of my money. So part of it's not greed, but part of it's just like this weird resentment around like going through this random third party to then find an audience. I'm like, that doesn't sound right. So a little bit of resentment over the way the industry is structured with these weird salespeople, middlemen. Uh-huh. And so I am committed to finding audiences and finding distribution on our own for now. I might throw the towel in and just go with an aggregator or go with a sales agent or an attorney, but part of me just thinks like, why? Those people should I feel like this like so inefficient.
I have had films gone through both routes.
How did it go?
You know what? It was really hard. The first film I worked on that we tried to get a distribution, was a horror movie, a Halloween themed horror movie. We could not sell it. And I don't know how hard the actual executive producer tried, but I do know that the moment that we got a sales agent, she got it to the right people and it sold to the same people who didn't want to buy it the first time.
Like, so what is that about? Like,
that is so weird. Silly. It is silly.
So I'm resentful of that. That's your story. You're literally telling me the horror story of what it is that I'm going through.
And the thing is, we had success self-distributing one of our films too. I've worked with a filmmaker who self-distributes all of his films. He used to work in Hollywood, didn't like the experience. Now he does his own truly independent films, and he sells directly to his audience. He has a simplified website, but because he's consistent and he does a particular type of indie film, he is successful. And every other year he comes back and he does another one. So essentially he takes some profits from his previous film and then he finances the next film. And so it's been consistent every other year. He's been doing
$50,000 to $100,000, or is it barely scraping like 5 to 10?
I don't know. I know enough that we can get some. He got some really good. He got some good actors as well as some amateur actors, and then mixed them with good actors.
Okay.
And so his films are an amalgamation of being these films that could be mainstream because of the one big name actor in it, but then are not really mainstream because he doesn't do mainstream type of stories. He's
That's very admirable. That is admirable. I haven't made that leap of faith either yet, which is do I just release these into the wild and then forego the money that I put into them? Because I probably spent $40,000 to $50,000 on each one of my documentaries.
Okay,
it's a lot of money if it's just your own money.
Yeah,
and raising money from a couple of people. So I mean, I raised some money, got some donated, but for the most part, most of that was mine. And I want to be able to recoup my money. I want to make money. I actually want to make money so then I can make more.
Exactly. I'm just like that. And I can tell you this, that the one documentary that I did fundraising for was my most successful fundraiser because people like the subject matter. We're still in the post-production phase now. Hopefully we'll be done with it within a year or so. But we were successful in raising money for it. We're really happy with that one. Whereas some of the other films we worked on, some of them we've had an actual executive producer, and some of them we scraped as much as we could from the bottom of the barrel just to get it made.
Taking your kid's piggy bank. It's like, where'd my piggy bank go? You're like, dude, don't worry about it. Don't worry.
A lot of us indie filmmakers are like, we have a story and we don't want to wait 5 years to try and get someone to give us the money to do the story, because then by that time we will have moved on to another story that we want to tell.
Yeah, no.
So I commend all indie filmmakers. Even though the technology out there makes it simple for anyone to make a movie, the story aspect of making a movie is not simple. Not every film that gets made has a good story. Your film, like I said, it hit particularly because of the type of story it is. That's why it's good.
Yeah, thank you. That means so much. Yeah, story is king. It is like super important to have good story. And the problem is the cooler the story, the more money you need, and then gatekeepers. Apparently, there's some random sales agent that has a cigar that doesn't like me, or
I don't know. I've never distributed a documentary film. Every one of my documentary films, except for the one I did the Indiegogo fundraiser for, has been short movies. So I never tried to get distribution for them. When this one's done, it's supposed to be a feature. We're going to try and get distribution for it. But I've never had to work in that arena for a distribution partner or anything like that, or sell one.
You did Indiegogo though to start.
I did Indiegogo because my partner, my co-director, she was very new to this. I was the production manager / cinematographer / co-director for the film. She was the person who came up with the ideal. And she conducted all the interviews and all that type of stuff because she had a story she wanted to tell, but didn't know how to tell it. So me being one of her best friends, I was like, I do all the tech. I'll get all the tech, get all the equipment. We raised money on Indiegogo because she didn't live in my state. She had to travel. So we had to pay for traveling expenses. We had to pay for living expenses when she traveled, stuff like that. And we got more than what we were asking for, which was a godsend, which meant that we can go back and shoot more days.
That's incredible. That's for a documentary or a narrative?
Documentary. My narrative ones are very iffy when we did a fundraising campaign. It seems that everyone out there is trying to do a narrative of something, and it's a lot harder.
Yeah, I know. You kind of have to figure out how to get on their trending, and then maybe you get lucky.
We lucked out with our documentary because it was a very simplified campaign. It wasn't anything flashy, but I think it was the story that got people interested, and that's why we got the money we did.
That's perfect. Crowdsourcing is good. Crowdfunding is a great idea. It's just it can't solve all the issues, but it definitely solves a lot of them for some. But I want to get into that. I've seen them fail too, though, where you put, it's like you can't get $1,000, let alone.
I've been on several that failed. You tell people you're not going to get $1 million from crowdsourcing unless you have Leonardo DiCaprio. Don't try to get $1 million for your movie. Get something much more feasible.
I know. That's funny. I love this stuff. No, it's good to talk about, though. I mean, this independent stuff is, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. There's got to be good revenue streams. The problem is, I want to treat it like a business. Like I know how much I spent. I want to know how much I'm going to need to make, and so in order for me to be able to make something new, I want to be able to recoup what I already spent plus make money, so that I can make it some sort of feasible cycle. But it has stunted my ability to just keep producing because I work with a lot of creatives. Like I'm not the creative, I'm more the business side of things. And so I'm working with all these creatives and they're chomping at the bit for the next idea, like you were talking about, but we're hampered by a lack. But I'll tell you this is how I know it's doable. So I'm creating this distribution list on Excel. I'm going through all the distribution companies and I'm finding out who all the major players are on IMDb Pro. And I'm putting this distribution list together. This is a very valuable list because it's got everybody's name, what they do, their phone number, and then I'm looking up their emails and stuff like that. So I'm creating this list and I start sending emails out. And I send an email out to a distribution company and I got an automated response back. We don't take any solicitations, blah, 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 blah. And then an hour later, I got an email back from somebody at the company that was like, oh, yeah, if you want to talk about it, let's just hit me up. I was like, wait a minute, your team just literally told me. So I know it's possible.
Oh, wow.
I know it's possible to get through to these people.
Yeah. And I will say this, though, because one of my distributors for one of my films, took a really old film of ours and is actually trying to do something with it, which is kind of amazing, but odd. But
good.
We decided because it was an older film that we weren't going to take anything up front for it. And surprisingly, because the ideal caught on, the film did, it's actually netted us a profit after a year being out there. Now that won't happen with every film. I tell you that now. I haven't had one film that's been out there. We ain't never made any money other than the fact that we sold it to a distributor, and we ain't made no profit after that.
Really?
I'm not expecting to ever see a residual check from that other movie.
They're gonna send you a bill. You're like in collections somewhere. You're like, wait a minute, I didn't agree to this Why do I have a Comcast collection for? Oh, that was for my movie. It's like Blockbuster Video sends you a bill.
I think that the distribution chain is changing a lot now, mainly because there's so many streaming services out there needing content. So it's not like 10 people who are only buying movie. It's more like 100 people who are willing to buy movies. And some movies are pretty bad, as we all know. There's always going to be bad movies out there that didn't cost them anything to purchase. But then there's also movies out there that they're going to stick their neck out for and support. I'm hoping I could find one will do that with documentaries. So hopefully,
if you do, you do. It's like you're the golden. I'm gonna share. I'm gonna. As soon as I can crack the code, I'm gonna try to bring other people up with me, because it's such an unnecessary. There's such unnecessary gatekeeping in this industry. They have people that read scripts all the time. They buy scripts for $250,000. You know, they buy it and just sit on them. They shelve them.
Sit on them.
Yeah, but they can't buy like a decent documentary for the same thing. I mean, it's like, give me a break. So I'm gonna crack the code, and when I do, I'm going to my distribution list. I'm gonna curate the coolest distribution list in the world, and I'm probably just gonna sell it and give it away. Like,
sell the list. That's where you make your money. You're selling this curated list of distributors.
Not a bad idea.
No, it's actually not a bad idea.
I would buy. If somebody else was offering it to me, I would buy it. You know.
Oh yeah.
So.
Well,
but no, I think it's cool. I would love to collaborate with you, and anytime you want, man. Just stay in touch anytime.
Nice. Yeah, same here. Plus your other films, by all means, because I haven't opened up submissions yet. I usually give a waiver for returning filmmakers. So please hit me up if I forget to send it out, because sometimes we get a little busy now that I have 3 freaking film festivals. So my time gets a little scatterbrained sometimes. But by all means, I am really looking forward to your other movies. So please hit me up, send me a link, and if your film, this one, Nate, gets distribution or any other accolades at film festivals, please let us know. We will post them on social media and everything like that, because the goal of our film festival is to help get films at least some notification, if not some easy publicity from these interviews, from the panel discussions, and so on and so forth, stuff like that. So
awesome. Yeah, thank you. Well, we'll stay in touch, and then I will. I'll let you know, and I'll check to see about the other movie that I have out right now, and see if I already submitted it or not. I probably didn't. Maybe I did. I don't know. I submitted both films. I went through both films, and I was like submitting, and it's like.
All right. Well, Paul, it has been a pleasure. And I wish your film nothing but continued success film festivals. And I can't wait to see the next film. And hope you have a good evening.
Thank you. Same to you. I appreciate that a lot.